1983 році, з нагоди 50-ї річниці Голодомору, Комітет дослідження Голодомору при Канадсько-Українсько-дослідчо-документаційному центрі в Торонто випустив документальний фільм «Жнива розпачу» «Harvest of Despair». В цьому фільмі режисери зібрали багато матеріалів про голод 32-33 років і сказали цілому світові правду про причини голоду, які багато років скривали комуністичні архіви.
The year 1933. The place, the Soviet Union. Behind the facade, food is being used as a weapon against peoples who have proven troublesome to Moscow. Famine is engineered deliberately in the North Caucasus, the Volga Basin, and Ukraine. The Soviet secret police seal off Ukraine's borders. No one can get out or bring food in. A nation the size of France is strangled by hunger. In less than 2 years, 10 million people die. 7 million of them in Ukraine. 3 million of them children.
This is the most terrible thing I've ever seen. Precisely because of the deliberation with which it was done and the total absence of even any kind of sympathy.
If you revive this terrible past, and you are always shaken again, and it moves you again, and you can't get rid of these terrible pictures you have seen or these terrible reports you have gotten in this period.
Nearest city was 40 miles, so I walked about once a week or so to that city. I could buy for my salary 2 loaves of bread a month. So that's only how we could survive. But the peasants were dying.
This was the first time in my life that I saw people dying. And of course, it was very hard.
The untold story of Ukraine's darkest tragedy begins at a time of great optimism and joy in March 1917. A tidal wave of revolution sweeps aside the mighty Tsarist Empire. National boundaries change rapidly with the dramatic shifting of power. Ukrainians grasp the chance to reclaim their independence after 200 years of Russian domination. Kiev, Ukraine's ancient capital, is once again the seat of government. Ukraine's rich and fertile land has supplied Europe with grain for countless generations. Even the ancient Greeks depended on her abundant stores of wheat. History has taught Ukraine that freedom has a price. The people prepare to defend their national republic against all invaders. December 1917. Having consolidated Bolshevik control in Russia, Lenin prepares to reclaim the former Tsarist territories. In 4 ensuing years of chaos, Ukrainians fight Lenin's Red Army, Denikin's White Army, Germans, Poles. Whether the armies march in as enemies or allies, the price is always measured in tons of food. This bountiful country is slowly bled dry. 1921. The dust of battle finally settles. Russia has retaken the major part of the country. Western Ukraine is carved up between Poland, Romania, and Czechoslovakia. The Soviet conquerors ship out more and more grain to feed Moscow. A drought adds to Ukraine's misery. Millions die as the breadbasket of Europe experiences its first famine. Yet this is but a preview of the tragedy to follow. To end the continued resistance to Bolshevik rule, Lenin adopts a new economic policy. Grain requisitions are canceled. The peasant farmer is allowed to trade freely on the open market. The impact on Ukraine is dynamic. 80% of her population are farmers. Hoping to win further support, Lenin tolerates the national revival which has been gathering momentum since the 1917 revolution in Kiev. Ukraine's blossoming renaissance is so powerful, Lenin's successor, Stalin, views the loss of Russian influence with increasing alarm. Ivan Maestrenko was a Marxist instructor of journalism in Soviet Ukraine.
A meeting of the Politburo heard a report that students in Kiev no longer know how to speak Russian. Everyone was shocked. How can that be, they asked. Well, in Ukrainian schools during the 20s, the Russian language was treated like French, German, etc., as a foreign language. And that's why students who came from Ukrainian schools didn't know Russian. And not knowing Russian constituted a clear threat that Kiev would become the capital of an independent Ukraine.
Thousands of Ukrainian language parishes spring up across the country. For the first time since the 17th century, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church reestablishes its independence from the Moscow Patriarchate. In the arts, the flourishing avant-garde models itself on Western, not Russian, culture. Literary circles abound. Writers and poets develop a uniquely Ukrainian literature. Ukraine's leading communist writer, Mykola Khmelyov, elaborates on the dangerous slogan, "Away from Moscow." Even the leader of the Ukrainian Communist Party, Mykola Skripnik, sees the USSR as a kind of League of Nations and argues for greater cultural and political autonomy to win Ukrainians over to communism.
Mykola Skripnik really saw himself as an equal to Stalin, as an independent national ruler. I mean, when he went to Moscow, he'd take a translator, even though he spoke perfect Russian. He tried with some success to establish a cultural protectorate over Ukrainian communities in Russia. He even called for the direct annexation of border areas with the majority of Ukrainians to Soviet Ukraine. So he was actually making territorial demands against Stalin.
By 1928, Stalin is a law unto himself. This efficient, ruthless administrator has eliminated all effective opposition within the Politburo. The dream of a worldwide communist revolution has not materialized. As Stalin strengthens communism within the borders of the USSR, Russian nationalism is increasingly injected into his policies. The strong cultural individuality of Ukraine is no longer tolerated.
Після перерви ми продовжимо показ цього фільму про український Голокост. Отож, будьте з нами.
There was rebellion, then sabotage. People did not give up. They attacked the local authorities, usually not killing anyone. They only tied them up and threw them into a barn or simply drove them from the village.